After months of declining support in the polls, Anthony Albanese and his Labor Party now have the task of resetting the agenda and re-engaging voters. New research reveals a growing number of Australians, especially those in the outer suburbs of major cities, are feeling disconnected from politics. Joining me now is RedBridge Group Director Simon Welsh. So what are you hearing in these groups? What's the feedback, Simon?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Yeah, it's interesting. I was sort of reflecting on it and thinking about how, politics often gets defined by sort of reaction and overreaction. And what we're seeing is, 3 years ago we were talking about too much government in people's lives, and what we're certainly seeing now from the focus groups is not enough government in people's lives. People feel like all the issues they're confronting are going unaddressed. Whether it's cost of living, whether it's housing, whether it's infrastructure, all those, those boring things that just are so important in quality of life. They don't see the hand of government making much of a difference on any of these things. And I think one of the more interesting bits of it, you expect to hear about infrastructure, you expect to hear about cost of living. I think one of the more interesting things is this sense of community building, or should I say community rebuilding post-COVID. There's this sense that the community still really hasn't sort of knitted from the effects of COVID, and then the cost of living crisis that came on the back of it hasn't allowed that to happen. So there's this. We keep getting this sort of desire for government to do more around, social connection. Whether that's looking at issues like homelessness, that's a big one that seems to keep coming up. It's of course linked to housing crisis. Whether it's issues around crime and drugs, these sorts of things that sort of plays out in that space as well. But there's something fascinating happening around sort of a desire to sort of re-knit our communities together right now.
Yeah, and we saw some other published polls this week and last week that shows people are really pessimistic about the economy. Is that what you're picking up, about life just simply getting harder over the next 6 months to a year? Are they blaming Anthony Albanese for that?
Absolutely, life is extremely tough right now for millions of Australians. We've seen the reports, from Food Bank, about their levels of people going hungry, those sorts of things. We see it in our focus groups all the time, with people just, how they're going to make ends meet. The latest interest rate rise, puts another $100, out of their pockets. Where people don't know where this money is coming from, and while they may not, so the views around it are somewhat nuanced in the sense that people can look at it and go, look, the effects of COVID are still flowing through, the global conflicts that we're seeing, all these things have an impact. Yeah, sure. But what is the government doing in response to it? We can accept that that's all true, but we still expect to see some kind of response, even if it doesn't fix everything. We still expect to see them sort of in our corner trying things. And that's the bit that's missing right now on the Albanese government, is they're just not seeing those concerted, even bold, they want bold action on cost of living, on cost of housing, those sorts of things. And so while they don't necessarily blame them for the cause, where they're pointing the finger is that lack of response.
Look, I'm seriously of the belief that you lose elections rather than win them, to be honest. But are people warming to Peter Dutton?
This is really sort of the only saving grace for Labor at the moment. The short answer to that is not really. There's an opportunity for him in the sense that strength is a characteristic that people want to see in leadership right now, and Dutton certainly has that in spades. But it's the other bit that people still want. They still want that kind of empathetic, warm leadership, and Dutton just simply doesn't tick that box. And Albanese ticks that box, but he perhaps lacks the strength and the boldness on the economic stuff. So, maybe if there's a hybrid of the two, that might work. But really, the only thing holding Labor up at the moment is that, if I can call it, that progressive vote, that vote that's landing on Labor at the moment isn't drifting back to the Liberals. It's soft, but it hasn't quite resolved where it's going to go. But I think what we're seeing, the sort of the early indications would be that it scatters amongst Greens, independents, I think will be a problem, but it doesn't necessarily look like it's just drifting back to the Libs.
Okay, very interesting indeed, Simon. As always, we'll see you soon. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Laura.